reminding people that it has been a 2 steps forward, 1 step back market for 5 years. You don't want to buy at the top of the 2 steps forward. You want to buy at the 1 step back. It's actually very appropriate that I should be introduced by somebody affiliated with Wall Street Silver, because you say you get some kind of criticism and maybe you can turn it limes or lemons into lemonade. And so some of the commenters on Wall Street Silver in that interview dubbed me Darth Silver because I wasn't with the program. And I wasn't the cheerleader that they wanted. I wasn't telling them, yeah, it's going to 150 bucks an ounce next week. So that made me in league with the devil. So I figured I'd own it. It's kind of funny the way this goes around. What goes around comes around. So this is Darth Silver Strikes Back. So thanks for that intro. That's really interesting here. So I'm kind of having fun here. I'm teasing a little bit. There was actually, I think, a very high level of conversation with the actual Wall Street Silver guys. It was not, any kind of star chamber. I didn't feel put on the spot. They were intelligent questions. And a lot of the audience was actually very positive. But you just have these knee-jerk reactions. It's like Twitter or YouTube comments. People just fire off some random declarative statement as though they are God and know all, and deemed that I was in league with the devil. One more thing before I dive in. It's a little bit of I'm kind of stalling here to get people to come back from lunch some time and so on. But I usually curse whoever it is who puts me on the agenda after Rick Rule, because he's such a hard act to follow. He's so erudite. He's so knowledgeable. I always feel like a bumpkin coming up after Rick Rule. Okay, yeah, I like gold too. or Doug Casey, my mentor. It's hard. He's a hard act to follow because he's funny. I'm just an analyst. I'm kind of the stick in the mud. I don't drink. I don't smoke. All that. Well, I didn't. Now maybe a little bit. So this time, oddly enough, I got to curse the programmers for putting me after Jeff Christian. That was, if you missed it, that was a really interesting and an informative presentation. And it kind of stole my Darth Silver thunder. If I'm criticized for not being a cheerleader, he's out there telling everybody there's no conspiracy, there's no smash down. All these cherished beliefs you have, they're wrong and ignorant. So, yeah, maybe he's Palpatine. So, I don't know. I feel like my stature at Darth Silver is a little diminished coming after Jeff Christian. That's a tough act to follow. How can I be mean enough? How can I beat up on Silver enough to be worthy of this mantle of Darth Silver? I don't know. But actually, I'm not here to beat up on Silver. I'm trying to be fact-oriented. So before getting to the facts, I wanted to say the good news first is, yes, despite being Darth Silver, at least on Wall Street Silver, I am actually a silver bull. And these points are probably nothing new to you. I'm with the program, at least as far as these things go. And I think one particularly interesting one is actually the bottom one, with copper supply being constrained. We all know that silver is largely a byproduct. So I think this is actually one of the things that I like the most about silver, is that it is relatively unresponsive to price. And we go back in time and we see there are times when gold and silver monetary metals are rising, but because of the economic issues at the time, industrial metals production is falling, and that puts silver in a supply constraint. At the same time, silver prices are rising and it pops. And this is somewhat what happened when the Hunt brothers tried to corner the market back in the day. It's also what the scenario was like in 2010 when silver went back up towards 50 bucks. And it is, I'm not promising this, I'm not promising the next breakout is tomorrow, but it is similar to the circumstance now where you have the Delta variant, you have the lockdowns continuing, you have these broken supply chains. There are supply constraints that affect silver supply, whatever happens to the price of silver. So those circumstances could actually set silver up for one of its famous mini-manias. So I don't think I need to beat all of this to death. Yes, I am a silver bull, and I want to get that on the record before I go on to look at some of the data. or some of the facts that I think really silver bugs should consider. Oh, Jeff is here. Okay, we'll see if I get sued. Common fallacies. I feel almost embarrassed to have to say this because we're not in kindergarten. You know, you disagree with me, I'm going to beat you up. Or high school, you disagree with me, you're just like Hitler. Well, you know what? Hitler had 2 eyeballs, 2 nostrils, 2 arms. We're all like Hitler in some way. These things, I shouldn't even have to say this. It's embarrassing. But you say anything that's not what the mob wants to hear, and you get statements like this. Well, you must be in league with the devil, or Jeff Christian. I'm not sure which is worse, actually, but, you know. But I just think this is important. Like, you know, if you are one of these people who fires off one of these statements on YouTube sometimes because you're annoyed, please reconsider. You're degrading the level of the conversation. And it's simply not true that someone who disagrees with you must be part of the cabal to control and destroy the price of silver. There has to be room for honest disagreement and discussion of the facts. And if there isn't, you can't really call yourself an investor or even a rational speculator. If all the information you want to hear is what supports my view, if that's the only acceptable information, you are blinding yourself as an investor. If you're going to refuse to consider data that doesn't support your pre-decided idea or notion, you are doing yourself a disservice. Never mind pissing me off or poor Jeff. You are doing yourself as an investor, as a speculator, a disservice if all you can hear is what's in your own echo chamber. So, won't beat that to death. But so, having said that, I am a silver bull. Don't fall for these fallacies. Don't participate in the Me Too-ism online when people say this nonsense in the YouTube, in the Twitter chatter, and so on. Consider the facts. Now, you don't have to agree with me, but you know, it doesn't necessarily make me Darth Vader's brother if I say something that you don't agree with. Okay, so here's some new ideas. Now, Jeff had much more data and charts than I'm going to give you. I'm not plugging Jeff here. I was quite impressed by the quality and quantity of the information he gave us. But I have some key ideas that I think we should think about as silver investors, as stock investors, as people whose purpose is to make money as opposed to some kind of religious crusade. If you are mostly interested in the religious crusade, I'm not your guy. If your purpose is to make money, I hope I can help you with important things to consider. All right, so one of the things that I noticed is that the correlation between gold and silver prices has really changed over the last year. And I ran the math, and I was really quite shocked. Over the last 12 months, I haven't updated this in the last week, but over the last 12 months, the correlation between gold and silver dropped to 0.2. It's almost nothing. It's almost no correlation. Over the decades, the correlation is closer to 0.9. They're monetary metals, and okay, the gold-silver ratio widens and narrows, but they go up and down almost every day together. But ask yourself, what does it look like? What do those charts look like this year, or over the last year? It seems almost every day they do the opposite. Gold's in the red, silver's in the green. Silver's in the green, gold's in the red. You know, what's going on there? And by the way, I don't pretend to have all the answers. What I'm saying is that if you're an investor and you want to try to understand what's happening in the market, you can't ignore the data that you don't like just because you don't like it. Sorry, grow up. That doesn't work that way. All right, so I think this is really significant. Now, okay, there are times where things fluctuate. Maybe next year it goes back to how it was. I'm not proclaiming the death of silver as unlike the YouTuber in UK took me on and suggested. That was a Kitco title. It wasn't my title. I am not proclaiming the death of silver. I'm saying there's data in the marketplace to suggest that things are a little bit different. And I don't have as many decades of experience as Rick and Doug or Jeff, but in my 2 decades of experience watching this, I've never seen gold and silver at such odds as we've seen in recent times. And that got my attention. I think that's worth thinking about. I think if you're serious about making money, you have to think about that. You can't ignore it. All right? Well, what does it mean? Well, you know, the obvious frontline theory will be that silver is starting to behave more like an industrial metal. And in fact, we see quite a few days where silver and copper are acting more similarly than silver and gold. And another thing that really struck me is that the rally that we had last year, okay, I do agree with the thesis that last year was not the peak for gold and silver. I'm not saying they're done. I do think we're in a correction and consolidation phase. And I do think that we're going to see higher highs nominal, and I think we'll see higher real all-time highs in both gold and silver going forward. But in that rally, and if you look at the past rallies like that, since 1971, when the prices were really freed, well, gold was freed and silver was already free at the time. But since that time, silver has always lagged. This is not new. I'm not telling you something you probably don't know. Silver has always lagged and then more than caught up with gold on a percentage gain basis. That did not happen in the big breakout last year. Now you could argue, oh, it'll happen going forward. Silver will catch up, as it always does. But you know what? After a year, year and a half, it's not the same breakout. You know, it'll be the next one. And so for silver to have behaved differently this time is a data point you can't ignore. Something is different. Something in the market did not happen in this big rally that has happened every single time since 1971. I don't think we can ignore that. So, two simple data points. I am not proclaiming the death of silver. I'm not turning bearish on silver. I'm saying please pay attention to this data. I think it matters going forward. So here's sort of the broad thesis. I do think we're seeing a change in the role of silver going forward. I think it's easy to foresee a day in which it really is no longer a monetary metal. And I'm not saying that day is today. I'm not saying silver is no longer money. I'm saying I can see that changing over time. And yes, I understand that silver has been not just the word for money, it has been money for thousands of years. I've said that myself on stage many times, just as I've said about gold. But you know what? Horses were the primary mode of transportation or center of transportation for thousands of years too. And now, okay, we still count horsepower in our cars, but very few people, but enthusiasts and hobbyists and polo players, have a lot to do with horses these days. And if you were an investor in the horse buggy whip manufacturers back in the day, and you said, nope, horse buggies and horse buggy whips have been with us for thousands of years, and they're going to be with us for thousands of years. These are God's horse buggy whips. And woe unto ye who says we shall no longer have horse buggy whips in the future. Well, guess what? You wouldn't have made a lot of money betting in that way. So, I'm not saying silver is dead. I am saying that there is data suggesting that its role is changing. And particularly on the monetary metals front, I think it's really significant that we have the advent of digital currencies now. I am not saying that Bitcoin is eating silver's lunch. I am saying that distributed ledger technology, or even other proprietary non-blockchain warehousing and electronic transfer of ownership structures that are out there and proliferating now, they solve the problem of making change for gold. If we had pennies to make change for silver, and if we had silver to make change for gold, because gold coins had too much value to go down to the grocery store and buy a loaf of bread, it made sense to have bimetallic or trimetallic money when you use the physical metals themselves as money in circulation. In the future, people don't even want to carry paper in their wallets anymore. Everybody does everything just tapping their phone. Or, you know, oh, I got to take out my card. Okay, I'll put my card on the thing, right? If that's such a great effort, who's going to lug around a medieval coin bag on their belt full of gold or silver or copper coins? Nobody's going to do that. Okay, people say, oh, well, but that depends on the internet. If the internet goes down, you better have your gold and silver coins. Well, okay, in a Mad Max scenario, in a post-apocalyptic world, yes, I will want silver coins as well as gold, maybe even some copper too to make change. But I'm not planning my investments around living in a Mad Max world. In a Mad Max world, I'm going to be hoping I can beat the dog to the can of the dog food, like in the first movie. Those will be my worries at that time. I'm not worried about, you know, bimetallic or trimetallic monetary standards. So, and by the way, I'm not saying that there won't be a collapse. I'm just saying that that's not relevant to which stocks I'm going to buy this year, unless I think the collapse is tomorrow, which I don't. What I am saying, though, is that absent an end-of-the-world scenario, modern technology now and the way we do business in the world now makes it so that there really is no use case for silver as a monetary metal anymore. And it's interesting in that context that where governments and central banks hoarded gold and silver for centuries, they don't hoard silver anymore. They do hoard gold. You've got Basel III treats gold as a tier 1 financial asset, doesn't include silver. So again, I can't stress this enough. I'm not saying I hate silver. I'm not saying I'm bearish on silver. I'm not saying silver is dead. I'm a silver investor. I haven't destacked an ounce. But I am saying that there is evidence we can't ignore that the market is changing. If your purpose is to defend God's money, more power to you. Go out there and do that. That's fine. If your purpose as an investor or speculator is to make money on what is happening in the markets, then you can't ignore changes happening. Now, I also want to say that if silver ceases to be a monetary metal in the future, this will take years. It is still the word for money in many parts of the world. It is still so-called poor man's gold in many parts of the world. It is a form of wealth preservation that is still respected, and it has deep cultural roots around the world. So this is not a change that I see happening tomorrow or next year or whatever. I think in years, it happens over years. And if at some point the fiat money experiments around the world do blow up, and the governments will never admit failure, but if the markets just root around and say, you know what, nobody trusts any of these funny money little pieces of paper or their electronic ghost, and the world does adopt a new gold standard, and gold actually goes, if not back into circulation as coinage, but back into circulation as backing for currencies, there's a good case to be made for that to be monometallic. It simplifies everything. If you go into the store and you're going to buy your loaf of bread, and now you can do that with 0.0001 grams of gold because of the electronic transference of ownership that's now possible. If you also had to look, okay, it's 0.0001 grams of gold, 0.00001 grams of silver, and 0.001 grams of copper, you know, what store is going to want to have prices in 3 different things? And if the prices are not set by governments, you know, the gold-silver ratio changes, copper-gold ratio changes, your prices would not only have to change every day, they have to change in relation to each other. To having a bimetallic or trimetallic standard in the future would enormously complicate the idea of using metals as backing for money at all. So I think there's a case to be made both that you don't need silver to make change for gold anymore, and that embracing a more complicated multi-metallic system would be very cumbersome, and the market would just not go there. The market would say, okay, people want something real behind their money. You know, maybe somebody tries using diamonds, maybe somebody tries using real estate. I suspect that the market would end up with gold as the easiest way to go. And so, changes over the years. What does this tell me right now? Well, it tells me, one, to be thinking forward about how silver prices might respond differently in the future as it becomes increasingly more of an industrial metal and less of a monetary metal. And by the way, this isn't a doomsday scenario. Just because silver is more an industrial metal doesn't mean therefore silver becomes worth less. The number of uses for silver, you guys all know, or you wouldn't be here at a silver symposium. You know, they keep discovering more uses. It seems like every day there's a headline about the new medical use here, or a new electronic use there, or new photovoltaic use here and there. So I'm saying that this change may happen. I see signs that it is happening, and it may affect what kinds of companies I would want to invest in going forward. But I'm not saying that it's the end for silver, or that therefore it's even bearish for silver in any way at all. That said, oh, sorry, is that on this side? I don't have it in front of me, so there are other signs of change, like the use of silver. I'm not sure this is in the right slide, but I'll just go with it. The uses of silver in industry are changing. The use of silver in the photovoltaic cells, obviously silver is a higher cost material. They try to reduce it. And I understand that over the decades, they have reduced the amount of silver that goes into these things by 30% or so. But the number of solar panels being made increases, so the decreased use of silver is swamped by the increased number of solar panels being made. There have been ideas about replacing the silver in solar panels for a long time. And it caught my attention recently that a copper solar panel just won an award in some competition in Germany for being more efficient. It's not just cheaper, but will take a cut in efficiency. This copper solar panel is more efficient at collecting sunlight and converting it to electricity than silver. And obviously, copper is much cheaper than silver. So changing times, okay? Don't ignore the data. If you're assuming that solar panels are going to keep silver, afloat forever, and that starts to change, don't ignore that data. I'm not saying this is the end of it. That's not in wide-scale commercial adoption yet, but don't ignore that data. If that really is a better mousetrap, and if you can have solar panels that don't need any silver in them at all, that would be a game changer. I mean, I would expect that to proliferate quickly. All right, so what? Oh, this is part I was saying. Okay, so yes, it will take years. I still, because silver is still regarded as a monetary metal, it still trades on that basis. It still has the investment demand. I think in the part two of the rally that we're in gold and silver, I do expect to see new all-time highs, both in nominal and real terms. And so I'm investing on that basis. I have 2 stocks right now on my shopping list in the Independent Speculator. One of them is a uranium stock, and one of them is a silver stock. So I'm walking the talk. I'm putting my money, my own personal money, where my keyboard is on this. I am not anti-silver. But there is one sort of takeaway longer term, one change that I would do really different right now. And maybe this will earn my Darth Silver mantle again. And that is, it does make a difference to one I want to stack. Because if I'm stacking large quantities of silver, because I think in some Mad Max type world, I'm going to need a lot of it to transact, to use as coinage in circulation. If that doesn't happen, then it makes no sense to stack a lot of silver. If I want to save in bullion, it's much more efficient to stack in gold. You have much less space, it doesn't tarnish, right? You don't have to take it out and polish it every once in a while, right? So it does make a difference in what I want to stack. I don't know if the coin dealers are going to hate me for that, and I will have earned my Darth Silver mantle. But I just see that as something to think about. And by the way, even if I was convinced we were going down the Mad Max pathway, if I have a bunch of gold, there's going to be a money changer somewhere who'll be happy to take my ounce of gold and give me X ounces of silver for it. So I don't actually have to hold the silver now, waiting for the end of the world. I'm sure, if there were money changers in the temple that Jesus had to throw out, I'm sure before we go through the pearly gates, there will still be some money changer somewhere who will exchange my gold for silver if I need silver. So that is an actual material right now takeaway for me. If I already have a stack of silver, why do I need a ton more? It's more efficient to stack more gold. Okay, any eggs, rotten tomatoes? Yeah, okay, all right. Stressing again, face the future with the eyes open. I'm not telling you this will be, that will be, but look at the data. Pay attention to the data. And particularly for silver investors, I think you must always, always, always remember that it is a byproduct. Even the so-called silver mines are really lead mines or lead zinc mines with really big silver credits. And a few of them have so much value in the silver that you could toss the lead and zinc, it wouldn't matter, they'd still mine it. But most of them, the lead and zinc credits matter. You have to be able to sell the lead and zinc as well, or your mine doesn't make money. And for the big copper ones, the giant porphyries that crank out tons of silver they couldn't care less about, and therefore they're happy to forward sell it to the Silver Wheatons of the world and companies like that to help their finances. Those guys are going to produce regardless of what the silver price does. Doesn't matter how low it goes, they're still going to make a lot of silver hit the market if there's demand for copper. So don't ignore these things. Don't, just because you love silver, that doesn't mean the world has to love silver the way you do. Now, and that brings a sort of double-edged sword with the electrification. As the world goes into all these electric cars and this charging stations, all these power things, they're going to need a lot more copper. That's going to produce a lot more silver. Now, the good news is that takes a long time. As somebody said earlier, the years typically between defining a discovery and putting the mine into production is something like 10. I think that's actually outdated, especially these big projects. The really big ones that matter. They're so big, they disrupt the countryside so much that the permitting is becoming even before the changes in Peru, for example, a very pro-mining country, it's become increasingly difficult to advance any of these big copper projects. They all get protested. So the good news for silver bugs now is that this story puts an extra oomph, it puts extra demand under silver. And it will be many years before the supply can catch up. Farther ahead, though, the copper supply and the copper bull story is of questionable help to silver. Now, especially if copper can be used in solar panels. Otherwise, they'll need to discover a lot more uses of silver for the increased copper supply in the decades ahead not to have a negative impact on silver. Something to keep in mind. On this new use thing, I think the bottom line there is actually an important thing to remember. When I first got started in this business about 20 years ago, Doug Casey asked me, the very first thing he asked me to do as a sort of trial of my research skills and writing skills is he asked me to do an article on silver. So I went on the internet and I read a bunch of things and I wrote a paper about silver, and it was, forget the English teacher who covers it with red blood and all these corrections. It was the most devastating critique of my life. He just wrote at the top, reads like a magazine article. That was it. In other words, it wasn't worth reading at all because journalists are ignorant and they write all kinds of crap they know nothing about. So it was a complete waste of ink. That was the entire critique. So I had to rise to the occasion, dig in deeper, and actually do original research. Look at the data and not just regurgitate things that I found other people saying online. But one of the things that I found, and one of the things that was an issue back then, was the spool down in photography. And there were a lot of silver bears then saying, oh, the #1 industrial use is silver is in photography. The digital photography is killing film. Silver is done. It's toast. And the governments are dehoarding silver at the same time. They stopped using silver in coinage a long time ago, but they still held a lot of silver because you never knew. They might be forced to go back and use silver in coinage again. And it wasn't until really the 90s that the governments kind of said, yeah, we're never going to need this silver, and started dumping it. Am I right, Jeff? No?
They started dumping in the 70s and especially in the 80s.
Did it not accelerate in the 90s? Am I just imagining that? I thought
You're imagining it.
Okay, all right, well.
What happened was that there was a change in China, and there was a lot of silver there was a lot of lead, zinc, and copper concentrates being brought into China where they were building smelters. And they took over the smelting of base metals. And there's a lot of byproduct gold and silver that the Chinese government didn't want in China. So they had it all exported. And people who didn't know what they were seeing said, oh, the Chinese government must be selling all of its silver inventories. But it was actually byproduct from current production.
All right, I don't know if you all heard that, but I'm just going to accept it as a given. I'm not going to argue about it. But for the point was, though, I hear you. I'm just going to accept it. There was this story at the time that the end of film photography was the end for silver, and it turned out not to be true. You agree with that?
With photography, one of the things that people didn't realize was that there was like 250 million ounces of new silver use each year in photography, but there was 120 million ounces of silver being recovered from old photographic paper and film.
Yes,
so it was really a loss of 150 or 130 million ounce market.
Okay, so the whole thing was blown out of proportion. The point again for today is, if the solar panel thing changes, I do think that's significant, but we are still discovering more new uses of silver, more electronics. It's not the end of silver. It's not the only use of silver, and silver's death has been predicted, not by me, before many times, and it hasn't died. So again, the thesis is not a bare thesis. The main point, the main takeaway, though, is to keep your eyes open and to not refuse to look at data that contradicts your cherished notion. If your purpose is to make money, you have to look at the changes in the marketplace and see what's happening. And that's what I hope to do. Okay, so I expected a lot more pushback than I'm getting, besides from Jeff. You don't have to agree with me, but this isn't kindergarten. It should matter to you that I'm willing to say things that I think you might not want to hear. That I'm not just here to tell you, yeah, it's going higher forever. And if I really want to make myself unpopular, I will say, when it comes to sources of data, I never listen to the CEO of a company that produces that metal about what that metal is going to do. Of course a silver company CEO is going to tell you, oh, it's going to 150 bucks. Oh, it's going to... When has the CEO of a silver company ever said, you know what, I'm kind of bearish on silver now? Have you ever heard one say that? That's not a reliable source of information. I'm not saying they're all liars and thieves. I'm just saying if I wanted to know about copper, I might ask a silver guy who knows about it because it affects his industry. But he's not a direct interest. There's no conflict in him talking to me about it. Or I might ask the copper guy about silver. Or I might ask a guy who has no horse in the race. You know, what does he think? What does she think based on their experience? But you know, you can't live in your echo chamber if you want to make money. Is really the bottom line here. So hopefully I've persuaded you that if you want unbiased, and I may not always be right, as we've just seen, but if you want at least unbiased error and truth sometimes, then you want the independent speculator, and I hope to help you out with that. So that's it. I don't have a gazillion things. A lot of people like to ask me what I think about XYZ company or other things, so I really wanted to save time for Q&A, and I'm here. A lot of people ask me questions I can't answer because that would be giving individual investment advice. And at a conference and podium in this public forum, I can answer any question because it's not aimed at an individual. So here I am. Knock me out. What can I do for you?
So I've heard you say before you've never sold silver except for that one time financial crisis.
Yeah, 1999.
So let's assume that silver does go back up and reaches a new all-time high. Would you sell at that point in time and convert over to gold? Or are you going to just hold that silver?
Right. Okay, so would I sell silver if the prices rose up enough? So let me distinguish here. There's the bullion, and I don't see the bullion as an investment at all, gold or silver. I see it as savings, or you could think of it as an insurance policy. Why would I ever sell my savings? You know, I dipped into it in 1999 because of an emergency. I understand. I'm just clarifying. So it doesn't matter what happens to the price. You know, if I dip into my savings, it's for some other reason, not price related. So whatever happens to the silver price, no, I'm not selling my silver coins. I have a comfortable stack. As I stack more, it will be more gold and silver now going forward. But those are there long term. And if I never sell any of them and hand them down to my kids, I'm perfectly fine with that. Now, as an investor, you know, if I'm involved in the ETFs or I'm trading those, then yes, I can certainly see times when the gold-silver ratio gets extreme, flipping from one to the other. Right, riding the differential there, and that can work on the upside and on the downside. Personally, I don't do that. I really focus on the stocks. So rather than selling silver to buy gold or the other way around, what would happen would be is my focus would change. Right now, I'm very keen on buying more great silver stocks if I can find one, because I think there's still that big ramp up in silver ahead. But when that changes, or after the fact, then I'll probably be more keen on accumulating more gold or something else. We'll see at the time. Maybe, you know, I'm. By the way, I'm not a perma bull. There will be a day, and you may all hate me then, but there will be a day where I will be selling my gold and silver stocks, where I think, you know what, this is 2012 all over again, or something like that, and it makes no sense to be mauled by a bear year after year after year. I hope I have the courage and the integrity to follow through on that is my intention. I don't, you know, there will be a day that I sell. But this is in the stocks. As an investor, as a person trying to make money, it's in and out of the stocks that I would change my focus, not the metals themselves. Does that answer the question? Okay, all right. Other questions? Come on, guys, I can't, you ask me these emails all the time. What should I do about this? What about that? You know, and I can't answer it. It's individual advice. Yes, sir, please.
What, in your opinion, are the top dividend-paying stocks in the gold and silver realm?
Well, I'm actually going to have to confess some ignorance on that one. I'm so disinterested in dividends. I'm very much a capital gains investor that I don't pay that much attention to them. It's not a reason for me to buy, like, ever. I've never bought for a dividend. That said, I've just been looking into Polymetal, one of Rick Rule's favorite disclosures of potential conflicts of interest. And they have a whopping dividend. That's really striking. I had no idea they were paying that much money. It was like 6% or something yield right now as of the last financials. I'm not recommending that stock. I'm just saying, he asked about top dividend payers, and I was shocked to find it's a Russian company, Polymetal. It's listed in Moscow and in London, and they have a whopping high dividend. I like the big royalty plays as having that little dividend upside as a plus there. It's not my reason for buying. And by the way, side digression, but I moved to Puerto Rico like many other people in the business to take advantage of the tax incentives. One of those is a capital gains tax holiday for 20 years. And I'm not pitching Puerto Rico. You really it's not for everybody. But that's short and long-term gains. So I can move in and out of positions in ways that would not be tax efficient for many of my clients. So what I do is not always what everybody would do. And so, but also with capital gains, that's part of why I'm so focused on that. I'm not near retirement, and I have no tax consequences for rapid capital gains moving in and out. So that's really my focus. So I mentioned, I guess, a couple. I hope that's helpful. Yes, sir, in the back.
Was that 6% dividend annualized or a quarter?
That was, as I saw the number, it was a yearly yield, so it's an equivalency. But their mandate, I think right now, their board decision is a 45% return on capital in dividends. Like paying dividends is a huge part of what they do. It's not just about growing the company and putting the money back in the ground. Barrick's getting a lot of press for their $750 million in capital return in $250 million tranches. But that's sort of a one-off thing. Oh, we've got all this extra money, so we're going to return some money to shareholders. Whereas this company, that's ongoing. They have to give back. Right now, the number is 45% of that profit goes back to shareholders. So I guess if you're a Russian oligarch, you want that money back.
I think that's what Polymetal is the largest shareholders want
Yeah.
their money.
Yeah, right. Okay, other questions? Yes, sir.
Do you own any other resource stocks besides uranium, silver, and gold?
Do I own any other resource stocks besides uranium, gold, and silver? Yes, I have copper. I have a couple copper plays. Some of them have other metal linings. By the way, just a thought, just a random thought. This isn't my original one. I'll give credit to a reader. Just looking at the incredible result of the Sprott Physical Uranium Trust and what that did to that market. How long before we see a Sprott Nickel Trust and a Sprott Copper Trust, whatever else they can manufacture that will get attracted? After this, the guys on Pender and Howe and the guys on Front Street and Bay Street in Toronto, I think they could open a Sprott anything physical trust, and those guys, that money would pile in. How well that would work out for those guys, I don't know, but it'd be interesting to see what happens. Yes, sir.
In terms of independent speculator, are you looking at mid-tier producers, or are you looking at more future explorers that have future potential? What are you focused on in terms of value versus the future speculation?
Let me digress before answering that a little bit. It's an interesting question because recently my friend Rick Roll has been talking a lot about these mid-tiers, and particularly the takeover potential in single asset mid-tiers with quality assets. Well, there's not a lot of mid-tiers like that. In the first place, he's narrowed it quite a bit. It's not all mid-tiers. But the broader answer to the question is this is sort of my version of the barbell strategy. You've heard of Nassim Taleb's barbell strategy? Well, the whole mining sector is entirely so risky that it doesn't really apply. But metaphorically speaking, I think of it as, my barbell is having some of the big, more relatively stable producers on one end of the barbell, and then the explorers on the other. And the big stable producer is not going to be a 10-bagger, but the explorer might be. And I think I'd rather have that kind of diversity than say, I'm going to go down the middle of the road and bet on these middle-of-the-road companies that have all the problems of the big producers, but they don't have the upside of the juniors and the exploration plays. So personally, I'm focused more on, and actually I usually focused almost entirely on the junior end. I'm still at a phase in my life where I'm looking for capital gains, as I just said. That said, I'm also a pretty cautious speculator. It's the independent speculator, not the wild and crazy speculator. It's not swing for the bleachers and everything. In fact, I have lost some clients who used to follow me back in my previous employment when I was not allowed to invest my own money in my investments. And it's a funny thing. Now my portfolio isn't just, oh, I might own some of these stocks. It is my portfolio. These are the stocks I own. I have 100% skin in the game. If I'm not willing to put my own money into it, I don't write about it in the Independent Speculator. And boy, has that made me cautious. I hate losing money. And I really, it hurts me when somebody says, oh, I did this thing and I bought the stock you said and I lost all this money. That really upsets me. So I've become actually quite a cautious speculator. To answer to relevance to your question, this has really restricted the number of junior exploration plays I'm willing to go there. I mean, you talk to all these guys, and I'll have the great story about how they're going to find this wonderful thing and so on. But, you know, exploration is hard. Success is rare. So really the only way I will bet on pre-discovery exploration is the prospect generators, using other people's money to defray the risk. After that, I would rather miss the discovery and participate in what looks like success in progress to me. And there's a free report on the website. If you search for success in progress at independentspeculator.com, I actually define that. And there's still gains. You know, okay, maybe it's not a 20 bagger if I wait until after the discovery. But you know what? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times my money, that's okay. I'm okay with that. I have no problem with 5 baggers left and right if I can do it with much less risk. Does that answer the question? I want to make sure.
Yeah, it does. I'm just thinking, you know, as a stock investor, I'm interested in buying number 2 or kind of these mid-tiers that have a possibility of becoming a large tier, and they're in production. And, you know, it's like everyone, if people are playing the barbell, maybe they're missing on the mid-tiers and there's value there.
Sure. Different strokes for different folks. I mean, that's what I do. I think that's a slower and less certain thing. And the mining business sucks, really. It's a terrible business. Doug likes to call it a crappy 18th century choo-choo train industry. It's a very graphic and I think accurate description. Nobody likes it, not in my backyard. The permitting, the problems, and the prices fluctuate. You miss your guidance and the shareholders trash your thing. Really, as a business goes, it's not a business I want to invest in. Discovery, going from having nothing to having something of whatever hundreds of millions of dollars of value, that's a huge change that share prices reward. And the transition, one of my claims to fame here is, as far as I know, I'm the first person to quantify the gains in the pre-production sweet spot, the transition from literally pouring money into holes in the ground, drilling, to extracting money from holes in the ground, mining. There's an obvious transition in market valuation for that. But it's so obvious that the assumption from my elders, my mentors, was always that it was priced in. You can see who's building a mine. It can't be that much. But it turns out that the transition is actually very large. It's the average in the entire database that I've dug up so far, about 115 cases. The average is a double. The average in a bear market is around 30%. The average in a bull market is around 150%. I mean, it's a really substantial recognition of the change from spending money to making money. I mean, it makes sense, but it actually works. So I like that a lot. And okay, it's not a 10-bagger, but it's a much more predictable outcome. If you can predict a win, well, how great is that? That doesn't get better than that in speculation. I think I saw another hand over here. If not, sure, go ahead.
Speaking of pre-production sweet spot, how many factors that you know are in that transition? Exemplar needs more.
Yeah, there are not many. There's only ever a handful per year, and I don't want to. There's so few that I don't want to give away any stock picks here. If you can figure that out, knock yourself out. By the way, the pre-production sweet spot is another free download at independentspeculator.com. If you type in the search engine PPSS, you should be able to find it. Obviously, all free stuff, you know what that means. I hope to do business with you in the future. I don't disguise that. But the free material, I think, is quite valuable, and there's no strings attached, and I hope you'll make use of it. I don't know how much time I've got left before they give me the hook, but until they do, I'm willing to answer more questions. I want to be as helpful as I can. Yes, sir.
What is your opinion about royalty companies?
The royalty company is actually, there's size there, but I really like the idea. As a business model, I do like the business model. All the things that I hate about mining as a business, you sidestep all that with the royalties. And, I mean, just just not to, no, let me not use that one as an example. But the number of employees to cash flow in the space is just gobsmacking. And that tells you something about the power of the business model. And if the miners still have to pay you, even if they're not profitable, they have to pull the plug on the mine before it hurts you. And even then, unlike them, you don't have thousands of employees. You've got 10 of them in Toronto or whatever, right? So I think it's a fantastic business model. It's less volatile for that reason, so there's less alpha. And if that's what you're looking for, then that's something to consider. But that also comes with much less risk. And despite that, the entire sector is so volatile that we've seen this. When you see, when it flips from bearish to bullish, the biggest of these guys can give you a double. And that's not some crappy little junior fly-by-night company. That's the biggest and the best of these things. So I see, like, rather than buy an ETF, if I want to bet on the swing in the whole market, then the royalties are a good way to do that, I think, with more leverage than just buying an ETF on the metal itself.
Piggybacking on that, what about the prospect generator?
Well, if you're asking me to name prospect generator companies, I think we all know who they are. But
He asked you what your opinion was on this.
so no, as I said before, that's the only pre-discovery exploration I'm willing to put my own money into. I don't have any there right now. No, not my own portfolio right now, because you really have to be patient. The good news is that since they spend other people's money, these companies can survive for years and years and years until the next big discovery comes along. The bad news is you never know when that's going to happen. Not me, not Rick Rule, not Doug Casey, not even Jeff Christian knows which junior exploration company is going to make the next big discovery. Not even the guys running the company know that. They all think they've got that, so they're false positive noise there. You don't know, and the best in the business. I will give one example, neither recommending it, but just for example, Ron Peratt, AUX success, they founded Renaissance, and these are like serially successful mine finders. Ron had 5 major gold mines under his belt, not just found, but discovered, built, put into production, all that, before Renaissance. And Renaissance struggled for years. They had a lot of other people's money, went through all these projects, and they didn't make the next big discovery. Now it's folded into a new company, and it turns out that there is the next big discovery. But they sold the project before it was made. Like, they had all these options, and in the worst part of the market, they didn't just option it, they didn't just get a JV venture, they sold it for a royalty. And now Anglo's made what looks like, we don't know yet, but they're drilling off a storm over there. So it looks like a big discovery in one of these projects. So what I'm saying is that even the very best, most serially successful mine finders in the business can just have unluck with Mother Nature for a long time. So as a newsletter writer who has a portfolio that people look at my average returns and how long is it, what have you done for me lately in my business is months, not years. So personally, I might invest in a prospect generator like that, and if it takes 5 years or whatever, 10, I could be okay with that. They're spending other people's money. I'm not worried about the dilution. But as a newsletter writer, that's tough for me to put in my portfolio. So I have none right now. But I love the business model. That's the only way to go, really. I mean, okay, yes, you can hold on to 100% if you don't option it out. But the odds of success are small. You have 100% of nothing, it's still nothing. And if you do get lucky years after diluting the heck out of your shareholders and you make a discovery, then you got to build a mine. You got to dilute them more. Somebody else is going to end up owning most of that mine, even if it's the financiers who pay to build it, rather than the original shareholders and the junior making the discovery. One way or the other. It's not going to be you. It's going to be somebody else. So, yeah, probably I'm going to earn my Rotten Tomatoes. Yes, sir. I have.
Yeah, I have a question. I heard you mention on YouTube that you're bullish on copper later and uranium now. So I have a positive account with a copper mine right now, a copper company, and I was considering maybe cashing it out and sprinkling the uranium. Any thoughts on that?
Okay. Yeah. No, that's fine. And so, let me just repeat that. The question is for everybody over there. Copper versus uranium. I said something on a YouTube interview about my long-term bullishness on copper, my near-term bullishness on uranium. And the question is, should maybe I rotate out of some copper into uranium now? The answer is flat out no. And I'm not sure when that interview was, but it was probably before uranium spiked up to $50, and a lot of the stocks, rallied. Now we have a correction right now. So actually, for people completely new to the space that missed the uranium bull, I think there's a gift right now that we have this correction phase. If you missed it completely, I would use the current correction to buy some, get at least a foot in the door, right? But no, I wouldn't sell it at copper. The other thing is I'm long-term bullish on copper. That doesn't mean I'm really bearish. Now, if we get more economic shutdowns, more economic bad news, that's probably bad for copper. We could see more weakness in the near term. But I would actually buy that dip. I think the copper story is very, very strong for decades to come. And so near-term weakness, I would actually see as a positive, as a buyer, as a person who wants to put more. So no, I would not rotate out of copper into uranium. But if I had no uranium at all, I wouldn't go all in, but I would certainly take, a first stake in some of the best plays that I could find, and then hope, maybe we'll see if we get a bigger chance to buy more. But at least I'd want my foot in the door. De nada. Okay. Yes, sir.
I see a stock recession and pull back in the future, a year out. But what's your strategy for a situation like that now that you're considering that silver is more traded as a commodity? Would you sell into a drop in the stock market, or would you just be holding cash on the side that you can add into your current position? How do you trade the direction?
Right. So, do you really mean correction, or do you mean market meltdown? Right, I kind of thought so. Yeah. So there's another free article on the website called "The Crash of 2021?" where I address this in different scenarios. I am actually much more in cash than I usually am, because I think there's a pretty serious probability, when that tapering starts happening, when the Fed starts tightening, I think there's a pretty good chance we'll see a major market sell-off.
Well,
And yes, that will whack gold and silver as well. We've seen this. We saw it in 2020. We saw it in 2008. I wasn't there, but I understand it happened in the 80s too. Black, whatever, Monday or Friday, whatever it was. When you have that liquidity crunch, people sell what they have to, not because they want to. As Rick explains, it's not the investor selling, it's the margin clerk selling. Right? So, and people will sell gold just because there's a buyer at that time, and they need the liquidity. So yes, I would expect to see that happen. I would expect to see the things near and dear to me. Now, this is one of those things where, as an individual, if I was a private investor, nobody looking over my shoulder at my track record, I might do things a little bit differently. As a newsletter writer who publishes every trade I make to my clients, I need to be aware of what this impact this has on them, how it might affect them, and the group of us all doing the same thing at the same time. That makes me, and I also know that if you sell in advance of a big waterfall event hoping to buy back in at lower prices, a lot of people will chicken out. They'll sell and they won't buy back in. Or they'll wait until it's way back up again. Now so they end up selling in the fear and then having to pay a higher price later. A lot of people just aren't disciplined enough to really do these things. And so I don't want to cause a panic. I don't want to cause people to realize unnecessary losses. And I also don't know for sure that there's going to be a market meltdown. If I was absolutely positive that there was going to be one, I'd probably be doing some more profit taking. I'd probably be trimming the portfolio a bit more in advance of that, indeed hoping to buy into that opportunity. But since I don't know what's going to happen, and all that money printing, it could be that it just goes on to even more insanely higher levels. There could be no market meltdown for years if that keeps happening. So I think it's dangerous to assume there will be one. It's certainly dangerous to realize losses assuming there will be one. And I think that deserves great caution. So my view, and as a newsletter writer with people watching over my shoulder, is I'm not doing any selling in advance of a market meltdown. Like individually, I might do that. But as a newsletter writer, I'm not doing that. But I'm holding cash, and I will add aggressively on the next meltdown. So rather than sell and then buy, hope to buy low, I'll just hold at least most everything. If there's something I'm worried about in my portfolio, if there's an underperformer, well, that would be a candidate for the axe. But if I believe in these companies and I think they're going to come through whatever the crash is, then rather than sell and try to buy and play clever and time the market, I'll just hold some cash and buy and average down. Does that make sense? Yep. And am I done?
I got
Oh, okay, sure, go ahead.
Lobo, do you have a grand strategy for your uranium campaign, looking out a few years for yourself and your subscribers? I mean, do you see a point where you would be leveling out, or after the boom, maybe not play around for the echo?
Sure, yeah. Uranium strategy. I'm, I'm going to earn my Darths, Darth Copper, Darth Silver, Darth Uranium here. I am not a perma bull on uranium. Uranium is not rare. It's not scarce. It is a byproduct. It's an iron byproduct. People keep talking about IOCGs and Olympic Dam. The Olympic Dam couldn't care less about the uranium, and it's a large source. There's uranium in gypsum. There's uranium in rare earths. The monazite. Uranium is a market where high prices can pretty quickly cure high prices. And even besides just the general market dynamic, we have the biggest producers in the world right now on voluntary supply constraint, like OPEC. Now, okay, it's not so easy to just flip the switch and turn a uranium mine back on again. But the mine is there. It's idled. It's ready to spool back up again. So this is not a market for the decades. My time horizon on uranium, my strategic view is that it still will go higher. It will take time for high prices to cure high prices, which will potentially propel them much higher. But I don't know if I'll hold any uranium stocks after maybe 2 years. I could be completely out.
There are at least 3 ISR methods that I'm aware of that are all potentially commercially viable. I mean, they're still being developed. But I mean, they could take a hole-in-the-wall thing that's got some uranium, take it out of the ground with some pipes, and there's the uranium.
Yeah, so now, and we have reassurances from the largest, lowest cost uranium producer in the world that they are going to maintain their reduced production levels this year and next, possibly into 2023. That was as of their most recent public statements. But you know what? That was before uranium spiked to $50. Those guys were able to make money at $18. So I would not be surprised to see that policy change. Now, again, it doesn't happen right away. So I'm extremely bullish. I think uranium goes much higher. And I'm hoping this time, without any big accidents or big kerfuffles, that it fluctuates and it settles down at around the incentive level, right? 60, 70 bucks. If uranium were to stay on an inflation-adjusted basis at the $60 to $70 range for years, plus or minus a bit, the better companies would make money in that space. And by choosing quality, you could still make money. But the big spike, the 2007 all over again, if it happens, and it doesn't have to happen, there was no Kazatomprom back then, but if it happens, it's a short-term thing, and I would definitely be looking to realize my gains and not stay long forever. No tomatoes on that one? No rotten eggs? No? Okay. You know what? Let me say one more thing. I'm going to get the hook soon, I'm sure, but I got so much hate on YouTube in August of 2020 for saying, $2,000 gold might not be a bad level to take some profits. And David Lynn was asking me about this in a YouTube interview that Kitco did. And boy, did we get so much hate. Oh, it's going to 3,000. What's wrong with you? How could you talk about selling? You're an idiot. You're ignorant. You don't know anything. Gold's going to the moon. Look at all the money printing, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? That's on record. You look at, I don't remember the name of the interview. But, and I didn't say sell. I just said, you know what? It would be rational. It would be reasonable as a speculator, never mind an investor, to lock in some wins here, guys. And boy, did we get hate. And you know what? With this uranium thing, it was kind of like that. When uranium started to move and Sprott broke out, and I started reminding people that it has been a 2 steps forward, 1 step back market for 5 years. You don't want to buy at the top of the 2 steps forward. You want to buy at the 1 step back. And boy, did we get hate. Oh, it's going straight up. It's going forever. There's never better time to buy today. Somebody, I remember that on my Twitter. There was somebody at 50 bucks there. You will never see a better buying opportunity going forward in this thing. I haven't heard from that guy lately, but I just the kindergarten level knee-jerk hate for saying maybe some profit taking isn't a bad idea. Look for the dips to buy. So I'm sure Jeff knows all about getting hate. I think my time is up, but I just want to say, you know what? That doesn't make you a bear if you lock in profits. The idea is to make money here. It's not to be religious about these things, okay? So for what it's worth, thank you very much. Appreciate your time and your questions.